Kola Iyuha Ichichab, Chase Iron Eyes Imachak, Iyawo Sla Imataha, Iyawo Sla Okashke. My name is Chase Iron Eyes. I'm from the Standing Rock Nation, which is part of the Ocheti Shakonwi Confederacy and the Tetawan Confederacy, the Lakota Nation or the Sioux Nation. That's the people that I come from. That's the language and the culture that I was born into. I live on the Standing Rock Reservation today, and it was the site of one of the most monumental pipeline fights. But it was more than a pipeline fight. It was about the separation that is perpetrated by the corporate state, but over history by the forces of colonization that were at work and are at work to this day, from Europe, spanning the globe now, and now we find ourselves in this hemisphere where we're at now. We call it Turtle Island. North America is another name for it. So the Lakota cosmovision or religion, way of life, mythology, way of knowing, our metaphysics and our epistemology are ancient. They're old as time, older than the concept of time. And the Standing Rock movement tied directly in with our ancient cosmovision, because you remember a phrase, water is life, or mini wichoni. And to say those words, mini wichoni, to say water is life, is a spiritual recognition of the sanctity of water, of a natural element, something that our modern economy, that's sold to us as civilization or civilized ways, doesn't even have the space for the mythological, cosmological foundation and background to even appreciate a worldview that's able to just say water is life, water is sacred. And it's like that because of our knowledge base. We have stories that tell of a time of darkness, is one way to interpret it, but the word in our language is ha. And darkness is not nothing. Darkness, dark energy, dark matter is holding the entire incomprehensible, sacred and infinite expanse together. Science is now able to show this, that 5% of the perceptible universe is what we as human beings are able to kind of avail ourselves of. But during this time, more than geologic ages ago, there was a spirit, a foremost and principal spirit, that became lonely and wanted to create of itself. And our stories personify this spirit as a male, which I don't know why we do that, but that's not necessarily okay with my daughters. You know what I mean? Like when I tell them these stories, they're like, how could you say that a spirit is male or female? And you really can't. But that's the culture that has been passed down. So I just leave it neutral with an it. This spirit, its name is Iya. And Iya became lonely and wanted to create of itself. In order to do this, it had to sacrifice its own blood and give of itself, create of itself, and it began to spin in motion and spun so violently that it created an explosion of intergalactic universal proportions and created the universe as we know it. But in that process, in giving of itself, it lost its power, its foremost position as the principal spirit, sort of the chief of spirits. And its blood became water. Its blood is water, and its power flowed into the waters and into the blue dome, the atmosphere around Mother Earth, the blue dome that surrounds Mother Earth. That's where Iya's power flowed into, and it became other powers and other spirits. But when we say Mini Wichoni, Iya's blood is what we're talking about. We call every creek, every stream, every river, every source of water, every spring, the bloodline of Mother Earth. And water is all connected. There is no separation of water. Every drop of water is connected. Whether it's groundwater, it's on the surface, or part of the atmosphere, it's all part of the water cycle. So when we say water is life, this is what we mean. And in order to stand up and to give of yourself, to protect water, is a sacred duty. One that, when we're all human beings that are trying to reconnect and recreate our sacred relationships to the land, to the waters, and to the natural elements. And one way to do that is to put yourself in those elements, and to, if you have songs or dances or ceremonies or ways to strengthen that connection, then you are among the fortunate on the planet. And thankfully, the original nations, the original civilizers of this hemisphere and other places around the world have kept alive those sacred covenants. When we talk about what would be called our culture, or I use the word cosmovision a lot because that's a word that an elder told me that kind of expanded my understanding of what we're doing when we center ourselves in the cosmos. Now, the Lakota cosmology is centered around a place called the Black Hills, and there are sacred sites in and around the Black Hills that are centers of ceremony that correspond with the movements of the constellations. And so at certain times, the people and the buffalo are at different places in and around the Black Hills to recreate these cosmic patterns. And it forms a sacred symbology for our people. And for me, it's time. Just the same as some of our learned people, our philosophers, our thinkers, our metaphysicians, the people who are trying to really seek a truth about how we know what we know, why we think we know what we know, and how do we keep that set of knowledges available and transmittable, not only to our own people, but for the benefit of humanity. Because our ceremonies are not just done for us. We don't Sundance just for Lakota people. we sacrifice and we suffer. Sacrifice and suffering is part of the human condition according to our way of knowing our place in the universe. And so this is something that we do for the benefit of humanity. When we fast, or when we pierce, when we offer our own blood, the same way that Ea did when the universe was created. So we are participating in recreating those cosmic sacrifices, and in that vein, we're helping to recreate life on Earth, the cycles of life on Earth, the different seasons that we're blessed with, the different four-legged beings that are older than the human beings. We are honoring our relationship with those beings, and for us, for the Lakota cosmology, that is the buffalo, the Pte Oyate, the Buffalo Nations. But for instance, for the Pacific Northwest peoples, that is a relationship with the salmon, or with the cedar tree. For people in the Southwest of what is now the United States, that is a relationship with the corn. And for the people in the East, it may be a different tree, or the deer, or the elk, or the moose, or the bear. It's a different. A lot of Western academia thinks that we are participating in something that they call animism, where you worship like an animal totem, and you do. And they're trying to understand it. You know what I'm saying? It's not like. But it's not quite that, you know what I mean? It's that they're older than us, and we have to honor and learn from them. That's our identity, our personhood, our nationhood, our existence as people, and our source of creator granted sovereignty, to be able to seek our own destiny, to provide for ourselves. In what I call a spiritual economy, those rights, those authorities, and those sources descend from and come directly from those older beings, whether they're four-legged, or the ones that crawl, the ones that fly, the ones that swim, or from the land, the sacred sites, and the waters, or the natural elements themselves, the sky, Mother Earth, the sun, and so forth. We have a whole divine order of a cosmology that I want to share. We have a role to play in re-civilizing the world, adding our voice to the process that is represented by like people at these festivals who are coming to try to liberate their spirit. They want to walk in a way of respect with Mother Earth and the natural elements. And everybody was colonized by these forces of capital, of the empirical method, or the scientific method. And science is not bad, but it had this effect of presenting itself that the scientific method and science, empirical science, is the truth, and everything else is like some primitive superstition, and all these ceremonies and these rituals are counter and anti to what the truth is, or the scientific method is. And we don't view it like that. The ceremonies, the instructions, the gifts that are still alive today are evolutionary in nature, and so it's meant for us to be open, to be worldly, global, and universal in scope, infinite, without end. So science is good. We incorporate science and the scientific method. Anything Western academia, theology, or philosophy, or any of their metaphysics, that's part of their journey. And we're at a point where we can learn that. We can transcend it, because for the longest time those forces have been used to usurp spiritual authority that we are all born with. That's the process of colonization, the separation of our mind from our spirit, that happened in Europe thousands of years before anybody from Europe landed on our hemisphere. They separated people from their spirit from mind, and from their food source, and even their labor from meaning, the capital, along with currency, the concepts of currency when they were first created, food surpluses, you know what I mean, in the very beginning of what has been sold to us as civilization. That process of colonization and results in this separation that we talked about yesterday. There is a very real effort to separate, you know, spirit from mind, and connection to people and to the older beings that are in our natural universe. And my effort is try to find ways to help the process of strengthening those connections rather than separating them or abstracting them or dividing them. We need to unify, come together, and know that we each have a spiritual home together on this planet. I talked a lot about, you know, the word indigenous. It's another one of those tricky linguistic things, because when we say indigenous, we want to think of the brown people of the jungles of South America, or the term indigenous nudity, for instance, refers to people that are trying to live in a liberated state. And it's for the last couple hundred years, it's been mostly brown people and black people who've been trying to do that. And so our dynamic is kind of set up like that, and it's false. We're all indigenous. We all descend from peoples and traditions and ways of knowing and being that were connected to the natural universe and the natural element. So we all had these cosmovisions. We all had those at one time. And now that you can see the people that, like in this festival environment and in other places, they're seeking that spiritual liberation. They're seeking a way to connect. And they're recreating it. And I'm here just to share, to learn, and to provide guidance at the same time about, hey, this is what has been alive in our cosmovision for untold centuries, you know, multiple millennia. And so that's why I wanted to come into these spaces, just to be available.